I'm Edie Lush, Executive Editor of Hub Culture. Really pleased to be here with one of our longtime partners, Jeremy Coller. You are the founder, chair of FAIRR.
Yes.
Define FAIRR for me.
FAIRR is Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return. It's an ESG network. It's over $70 trillion of members, assets under management, and it's the fastest growing ESG network in the world. So very proud that it's looking at bridging the knowledge gap for investors, and then investors engage when they where the issues affect them.
So investors, an incredibly important part of the community that needs to make COP the goals that we saw from the Paris Agreement put into place. You and I last saw each other in Glasgow. Catch me up on what's important to FAIRR in terms of farming practices, getting that into the COP agreements.
So I think we met at COP26 and we're now COP28. And we couldn't get food on the agenda at COP26 because of, for whatever reason.
Political concerns,
political careers. A lot of agricultural states, etc. But to get below the 1.5 degree limit, we have to deal with food. It's more greenhouse gases than the whole transport system, planes, trains and automobiles. So we have to get it on the agenda. And so we couldn't get it on the agenda in COP26. So for COP27 last year in Egypt, we as I mentioned about FAIRR, $18 trillion, 40 investors said we need a roadmap like there is for fossil fuels. We need a roadmap. How do we invest? You know, is it factory farming? Is that the definition of middle class for the developing countries? Or is it more protein? And so they took it on board at COP26 and they 27. In Egypt, and they committed to a food roadmap for COP28. And just at the beginning of this week, we had the Emirates statement, which is, help me out here.
Sure. So the Emirates Declaration says that we are going to see, as part of countries' NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions, we'll have to see the agricultural output coming into those determinations.
And that's 130 countries that have signed up to this. So
important first step?
Very important. History is on our side now, because once you've got that step, you've got to define what does it mean, nationally determined contributions, and what you measure, you can manage.
Right. What you measure, you can get the data of, and then you can start to change towards more green farming practices.
Exactly.
What's the opportunity for emerging markets in the West? Moving into middle class and beyond usually means eating more meat. Do we have to see? Do we have to see that in emerging markets?
I'd like to make an analogy with cellular or mobile phones. So the analogy would be we in the West put in fixed lines for our telephony, etc. But if you define it as communication, then developing countries said, why bother with fixed lines when we can go straight to mobile or cellular through towers and not dig up deserts and vast parts of the earth?
Land. So that's the opportunity for...
the opportunity for food is, instead of these massive livestock, we're feeding 80 billion animals a year for 8 billion humans. Now, the reason that's not sustainable is over 90% of deforestation. You know, we talk about nature goals, biodiversity. Over 90% of deforestation is a result of livestock production, not the actual animals per se, but over 80% of soy is used as feed. In terms of climate, more, which is very relevant to here, more methane gas than the whole transport sector, planes, trains and automobiles. We have to deal with methane to get below the 1.5 degree limit. In terms of water, the sewage, the waste, the toxicity, you know, of all the fertilizers, the nitrogen that's going all over the place, and the pesticides and the herbicides, because we're feeding 80 billion animals a year.
So is the opportunity alternative proteins? What's the opportunity for
that's one of the, you know, that's a very good question. So the opportunity ranges from better agricultural practices like drip feeding water, etc., to the alternative proteins. There are 3 types of future alternative proteins. There's the plant-based, like Beyond Meat, etc., which is mimicking burgers. You could think of it as the same protein value, but it's a sort of just transition for meat eaters on their way to lentils and spinach. You can think of recombinant, and recombinant really means biofermentation. So, you know, in the 21st century, why brew milk in the breast of a cow when you can brew it in a brewery by creating whey and casein, you know, exactly the same ingredients. So we're not talking about oat milk or almond milk, although you've got to recognize actually that oat milk, almond milk, etc., have gone from 1% of sales in dairy in the US to over 15%. The largest 2 dairy producers have gone bust at Chapter 11. And so, you know,
the third one, so the third
and the third is cellular, you know. So we have a choice for 2050. We can put the salmon on land in tanks and call that sustainable, or we can grow them in the lab. You know, we know all the cellular biology, how to grow muscles and fat and proteins in the lab, and we're on a journey to do just that. In fact, the FDA has approved cellular meat in the US with a company called Upside.
God, it's exciting times.
Very exciting.
All right, Jeremy, I look forward to catching up with you hopefully at COP29.
At COP29.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.